I was so into being a mom. I really loved it. I loved breastfeeding. I loved how it forced me to slow down. I loved our son so much. And I loved who I saw in myself. I was also really confident. And then I knew that I had to go back to work at month 3. And as I was rounding the corner into that 3rd month, I was terrified. And that was when I started to get depressed. If I am a white lady in Los Angeles on the west side of LA who has a legal education and is a high earner, if this is so hard for me, how the heck are people without those resources and privilege dealing with this? How are they doing it?
Welcome to the Golden Hour, the podcast community where moms and moms-to-be hear stories from other mothers and top experts in the pregnancy and postpartum care field. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. You can also find us at goldenhour.fm on Instagram for comments and questions. Welcome to today's episode of The Golden Hour. I'm your host, Dr. O. Today's guest is Erin Erenberg, attorney, advocate, mother of 3, and co-founder and CEO of Chambers of Mothers, the largest nonpartisan nonprofit in the United States dedicated to advancing paid family leave, affordable childcare, and better maternal health outcomes. After paid family leave was removed from the Build Back Better agenda in 2021, Erin helped transform that frustration and disappointment felt by millions of mothers into a national movement. Today, Chamber of Mothers has more than 100,000 members and over 50 local chapters advocating for policies that support women and families. In this conversation, we'll talk about why motherhood in America feels so hard, what needs to change in maternal health, and how mothers can turn frustration into action, and why supporting mothers isn't a women's issue, it's an economic and public health issue. Erin, welcome. This conversation has been months in the making.
It has. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here and to spend any time with you.
I know. I still remember our fated coffee date. Goodness, now months ago in San Francisco.
November.
And thank you for, look at you. Thank you for remembering. And I remember it felt like we were kindred spirits. It felt like I was hanging with girlfriends. It was you and Stephanie, who's another fellow Chamber of Mothers member. And I was like, I really hope that they don't think I'm creepy, but I kind of want to be their friends. And I hope that we stay connected. And look, fast forward, dreams do come true.
They do. And we felt the same way. Just such a genuine bond. It's great when you can just drop into real conversation with people. And that's how it felt to be with you.
Oh, well, thank you, Erin. And something that I really, we'll spend the next, hour or so diving into your personal story, what motivated the creation of Chamber of Mothers. But one of the things I really appreciate about you is that the parallels of your own story with my own, and that oftentimes in life we are kind of hit with moments that really frustrate us, things that really kind of push us to our own, limits, if you will. I think for me as an OBGYN, a big part of my own personal story, which I share often, is I went into medicine with rose-colored glasses, right? I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to heal the world. It's going to be great. I knew it was going to be hard, but I just assumed that every patient interaction, everything that I was going to do was continuing to fill up my cup. And then lo and behold, you actually practice, and burnout is real for many, many reasons. And you really realize that the healthcare system, especially around maternal health, is not set up for true success, right? I think for me, the biggest cliff that happens is prenatal care. We do great. We see mom and baby almost like a monthly basis, and towards the end, weekly. But postpartum, when things get the hardest, there's this dramatic cliff. And I think over months and months and maybe even years of going home and venting to my husband, who's an entrepreneur himself, he told me, he's like, well, do something about it. Turn your frustration to something productive. Like, stop whining and act. And so many parallels. This is my own small platform to advocate for moms and birthers and families out there. But I can't wait for the audience to learn more about what motivated you to create something as far-reaching as Chamber of Mothers. So let's get started, shall we?
Yes, let's do it. And I just want to say, you are healing the world. You're healing mothers. You're bringing life in. And I mean that truly. So I know that, it felt like idealism, but I see you doing it. And so I just want to say thank you.
Erin, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
So you often talk about the power of mothers. When did you realize that motherhood wasn't just a personal experience, but a political and economic force?
It was truly when I had our first baby, who is
Mm,
now 13. I was 34 when I had him. And I was not somebody that grew up saying, "Oh, I can't wait to be a mommy." I didn't play with baby dolls. I didn't even babysit. I was really ambitious around things that didn't have to do with motherhood. And I know motherhood is an ambition, right? But that wasn't one of mine. I thought a
mm,
lot about, I saw myself as an ambassador. I wanted to go to law school. Those were the things that were on my mind. And then I got married and I got pregnant, within months of getting married, which was quite a blessing. I ended up having a number of miscarriages later, which is another topic.
mm.
But the first one happened for me quickly. And I was surprised at how much I enjoyed every minute of it. Not having been somebody that had it on my list of
Mhm,
ambitions, quite frankly, I loved everything from learning about the changes that my body would undergo while pregnant to the kind of birth experience that I hope to have, to how I would involve my husband in that birth experience, all of it. And then I met our baby and I was thrilled. I mean, I kind of joke, but it's not a joke that I had postpartum elation versus
Oh.
postpartum depression. I was so into being a mom. I really loved it. I loved breastfeeding. I loved how it forced me to slow down. It tapped into gentle and patient and warm and kind parts of me that I think, as somebody who was sort of driven to create something, from a really small, poor hometown. And I had this drive of like, I got to get out of there and sort of quote unquote make something of myself, right? Like all that hustle energy went away. And
Mm,
it was almost like the passage into motherhood was what distanced me from that part of myself. And some of that was like false self, right? It was this trying and striving energy. And then I became a mom. I loved it so much. I loved our son so much. And I loved who I saw in myself. I was also really confident. I remember taking him to Canada to visit my best friend when he was 2 months old and being like, I can absolutely do this. And I did. And so I felt really sturdy in motherhood. And then I knew that I had to go back to work at month 3. I was living in
mhm,
California. I worked for a startup that didn't qualify for, a really robust paid leave, but I did get 3 months at the time. And as I was rounding the corner into that 3rd month, I was terrified.
mm,
And that was when I started to get depressed. I remember just thinking, it was depression and anxiety. I was thinking, I'm feeling really, really sad. I was crying a lot about how I was supposed to blend all of this that I just said, like all these new parts of me that I'd encountered and the love that I had for my baby and loving meeting so many other women who'd become mothers and being in community with them. It was just so wonderful with all of the things that I had been doing before. And in the zeitgeist at the time was Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. And so I felt like if I didn't lean in, I was a bad feminist and I was kind of crumpling up everything I did before. And so I just realized that, my goodness, if I am feeling so overwhelmed by this. And by the way, I didn't mention I actually had an issue in healing that was really
mm,
tricky to solve. So I was going through a lot in my body, with my ambition, in my brain, and my relationships. Everything was changing. As we know, we finally have a word for it in
yes.
matrescence, right? I was experiencing that revolution. And I was going through all of that, and it started to feel really hard as I faced the question of what am I doing about my career? And I thought to myself, if I am a white lady in Los Angeles on the west side of LA who has a legal education and is a high earner and is 34 years old, has, a couple decades of earning, and I am married, I have a partner who's able-bodied and also has an income. If this is so hard for me, how the heck are people without those resources and privilege dealing with
Mm,
this? How are they doing it? And so I remember saying to my mom, if I don't know what it is yet, but I am going to dedicate my career to fixing this for other mothers. And so fast forward, because there were a lot of versions of me not doing it in a quite effective way. And it took me a while to step out of, working for someone else. But once I did, To fast forward, I created something called Totem Women, totem meaning whole in Latin, because
Mm.
my belief is that we should all work toward wholeness, toward keeping that sense of wholeness that we had before we became mothers, adding in all the new parts that we're learning about ourselves, and just to work to be whole and to create a whole society too. So I created Totem, but I'll tell you, it was during the pandemic. I had a former colleague that reached out to me. She was at an organization called Paid Leave US. And she said, "Hey, Erin, Biden has introduced something called the American Family Rescue Plan, and it looks like we might finally get federal paid family medical leave. Can you, as Totem, sign on? We're looking to create a business council." And I was like, "Of course, number one, count me in. And number two, what else can I do?" Because I had started to realize that there was nothing I could offer mom. So through Totem, I was doing everything from selling lactation cookies that helped me keep my breast milk supply up after I went back to work, to offering expert sessions with women who were experts in fields that could help other mothers, to going inside the workplace and helping with their ERGs. But I didn't feel like anything I was doing was really helping, because it started to occur to me that the system in which we live is broken, that we will
Exactly.
never all have the wholeness that all of us has a right to until we live inside a system that supports and honors mothers. So getting paid family and medical leave is really just step one. So I got really excited, got invited to a White House briefing on the American Family Rescue Plan. I was pumped because in this plan, it was so inclusive. It included not just new moms, it included dads, it included leave for if you were in a domestic violence situation, if you were sick. It was just so wonderfully acknowledging of all the different ways that we need time to care, that our government would acknowledge and support. I got really excited. There was also a great childcare package in there. And it turned out a number of women, some of whom I knew in real life, some of whom I just saw their platforms online and liked what they had to say. We started messaging each other. Then we created a Slack channel. Then we were in a Slack with the other folks. We were newcomers to this and like learning, what does it mean to fight for these things? There were folks that have been doing this for decades, and they were giving us sort of the inside baseball of how close we were to paid leave. And then it failed. So
Mm.
paid leave went from 12 weeks, which isn't enough, to 4 weeks to nothing. And there wasn't even, it like died without a funeral. There was no acknowledgement of it. But moms knew, because moms were following it, because we had been this country's social safety net during the pandemic. It was, what are we going to do? We'll throw a mom at it. What are we going to do about school? The moms will figure it out, all of it. So moms were furious. And the other now co-founders of Chamber of Mothers and I really said, let's just go online, start a presence online. We contracted an artist to create a logo for us. And Chamber of Mothers came about because we said, you've got Chamber of Commerce, you've got the AARP, you've even got the NRA. There are all these groups. They're groups that are affinity groups that are
Mhm.
forming around a shared concern. Where's the Chamber of Mothers? And we said it out loud and made it happen. And back to your question of the pooling our power and having a moment thinking about our power. I was in the laundry room when I was having this conversation with my co-founder, Daphne Delvaux. And I thought, I'm used to seeing these ads of like, what is a mom? She's covered in laundry. She's barely scraping by. And she's doing everything for everybody else. And we honor her because she is so selfless. But the truth is, that is a con, because we are powerful. And there are 85 million of us with between 11 and 15 trillion in annual spending power. And we control 84% of household spending decisions. So anytime moms divide, we're not helping ourselves. When we come together, that's our pooled power. When we walk in solidarity, we have power. So we went up on Instagram. Our first post said, we won't build back bleeding, because the American Family Rescue Plan had turned into build back better. And we're saying, you're sending us straight back to work. We're bleeding. We're bleeding 6 weeks postpartum. I did all three pregnancies. And we were hearing from women who said things like, I work at a fulfillment center and I'm picking and packing all day and there's blood coming through my jeans.
Mm.
And I remember going back to work, feeling a lot of pressure when I worked as a talent agent, to go back to work and have a meeting. I'm like in my head right now, do I say the talent's name or not? But he's a rap artist. And there was
Okay.
a meeting with him, and my boss said, I really need you to come in. I was maybe 4 weeks postpartum, Dr. O, with our second. I went in, and when I hugged him, I got milk on his shirt. I felt my milk come in, transfer over from his top to mine. It's quite a moment.
Oof,
Okay. So
oof.
we've all been there. It just feels really inhumane. And that's
Mm.
where the rallying cry around paid leave started. And we now have three court issues. But that's my long answer to your question because you've touched on really such a fiery topic for me.
Oh, I mean, your passion, your compassion, your dedication, it's palpable. I feel it through the ethers that is this virtual connection that we have. And again, one of the many reasons why when we met months ago that I was like, this is a woman that I want to keep in my orbit. Gosh, Erin, so much I want to double click on. And number one, one thing I appreciate as there's so many people who either choose or want to at least consider motherhood or even have the opportunity to choose because that in of itself is a whole complex, nuanced situation. And I think I'm similar to you and other people out there that didn't necessarily grow up with that notion of like, oh, I must be a mother, I have to be a mother. But as I went through my own personal journey and my husband and I are finally at this stage where we're like, okay, we think we're gonna grow our family. Like, we think we're ready. And, part of it's also because I'm an OB/GYN and my biological clock is ticking loudly. But anywho, it's this understanding, I think, for me is I know several versions of myself, and I love all those versions equally. There's a version of me that existed before my husband. There's a version of me now, I call her Anna 2.0, that exists now
Love
with
it.
my husband, that he brought out so many beautiful aspects of me that I didn't even know I can gift the world with. And I'm
No,
convinced that there's a version that motherhood and that evolution and that epic transformation, mental, physical, emotional, social, that is matrescence, that will bring out an Anna version 3.0. And I
for
look
sure.
forward to
Well,
that.
I can't wait to see her.
If it's destined, and also appreciating there's so many different ways that we all can evolve, even for those of us who choose not to mother. But something that and we'll kind of spend more and more time talking about the mission, the current missions that is Chamber of Mothers and all the ways that you are impacting so many women out there. And I think I'm very biased because I'm an OBGYN, but I am convinced that any effort and energy that we focus on women's health, whether it's research, support policies around women's health, not only in the maternal health space but women's health in general, will only lift up our nation, will only lift up our communities, will only lift up our world. And it's not idealistic. It's a true sense that if you look back to social structures from ancestors and beyond, we know that women are oftentimes the bedrock of the communities. It's just fact. And so I love that you appreciate I love and appreciate that you acknowledge the power of the collective of mothers and examples of what women mothers did in chaos, chaotic and very stressful times like the pandemic, right? Like those that's who gets leaned on the most when we're in strife and so and strain. And so I'm hopeful that conversations like this and conversations that you continue to have on all platforms continue to remind people again and again and again, this is not a women's health issue or maternal health issue. It's an everyone issue. We all need this. But one thing that I truly wanted to double click on is you mentioned, oh my gosh, why am I blanking her name? Sandberg, first
Oh,
name
Sheryl Sandberg. Yeah,
Cheryl. I
Lena.
was like S. I was like, it's not Susan, Cheryl Sandberg.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. There's this concept that and it's I love to ask this question to my guests, is that there's a sense of like doing it all, right? Having a high powered career, still being a mom, still being a great partner and a sister and a friend and all these other hats that we wear. What do you think true work life balance looks like in modern motherhood that is real and not this sense of again whether it's a fallacy of doing it all? How would you kind of redefine that?
I did away with the idea of balance a long time ago. And I used to have a talk that I would do inside companies that was called Balance is Bull. Uh,
I love it.
because if you think about balance, and I'm a Libra, so I should love balance, right? And I do seek harmony. Okay, I'll say that. I seek harmony. But balance implies perfection. It's the sides are equal, they're just right. that is a problematic archetype for motherhood. Motherhood is messy. You know, you see the
Yeah.
beginning, it's messy.
Mhm.
And we have to be honest with ourselves about that. What I seek, and I've heard a number of women say this now in kind of popular culture, and I'm so happy to hear it, but I've said this for a long time. I seek presence. And I have a very good friend, one of my great friends in LA that I became so close with when first had our babies and our little boys are the same age. I was so struck by how if she and I were on a hike, she was on the hike with me. If she was with her son, she was with her son. When she was at work, she was at work. And she has a really successful book now and a successful business. And I think a lot of it is due to her ability to presence. You can think of presence as a verb sometime, to presence people, to presence her work. And she's a role model to me. She was from early motherhood. And the times when I am truly present, I see the best version of myself show up, the truest, strongest version of myself. And of course, from that place, I'm able to be most helpful to others, whether it's at work, giving the best solution to a problem, whether it's with my children. They feel that I'm really there with them and not like checking my text or listening to voice notes, which by the way, I do a lot and it's very stressful. But I know that the way I want to show up and the way I seek to show up is to really be present with whatever it is I'm working on. And I have to allow for grace and compassion because in the world that we are living in, that's really often not possible. I mean, it's so nice to be with you and to have my phone off. And I've said to my kids, you can't come in here because you and I get to actually connect. But in
Mhm.
the day to day, I think about it when I'm driving my daughter to soccer. I've got my CarPlay on, so I'm hearing voice notes come in and I'm tempted to respond to them. We always have so many inputs. And I
Uh-huh.
think as moms, when we feel responsible to answer and yield to all of them, that's where we can collapse.
Uh-huh.
So I try to come back to how can I be in a place that I'm giving my presence to every situation in a way that's due.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah. I love that. Dismantle this fallacy that is balance and really just staying present. And that's gospel. I feel like I'm in church right now. I'm like Erin's up there just preaching to me. That's gospel for so many people, right? It's not just
Yeah.
for mothers or moms to be or women who support different versions of families. It's all of us, right? My husband needs to listen to this episode, right? But really presence is so, so powerful. Diving back in to your work with chamber mothers, as you alluded to in our conversation already, the US spends billions of dollars on healthcare, and yet our maternal mortality rates are among
Mhm.
the worst in developed nations. We've talked about this before, and I know you know this well, that unfortunately amongst Black women, our maternal mortality rates are 3 to 4 times higher than others. What do you think most Americans don't understand about why mothers are struggling?
First of all, I don't think most Americans know that what you just said is true. I do the work that I do, and even in my circle of friends, they're not aware of that. When I say that, they say, well, what do you mean? Well, how do you I'm sorry, wait, what? How do you measure that? You mean in the United States, there's not enough. And that's why we have that power breakfast that you spoke at. It's to sound the alarm and
Uh-huh.
make people pay attention for over 2 hours to the fact that there is a maternal mortality crisis right here in 2026. And that
Mhm.
Black women are dying at a rate of 3 to 4 times. And same with Native American populations.
Mhm.
And so to really pay attention to that, and it's so important. Every time I say that, I always want to say, this is not to create an environment that leads to more fear and harm among Black
Yeah.
mothers and Black women who hope to be mothers. I think it's really important to say there is a supportive environment to be sought around it. And if you are a Black mom listening to this, I would say to you, have an advocate in the room, whether it's your partner, it's a doula, it's a midwife. We know that the incidence of harm and loss comes way down when there is support in the room. And unfortunately, there aren't enough doctors like you, Dr. O, who are looking like their patients, right? And
Mhm.
so find a provider that looks like you. If you can't, have that advocate in the room and have the
Mhm.
conversations ahead of time because what we know, it's a lot. harder to swallow and it's a lot simpler than one would think. It's because people aren't listening to women and they're really not listening to Black women. They are
Mm,
dismissing what's happening in that room. I mean, you probably met Charles Johnson, who came to our power breakfast. His wife, Kira, is not here with us today because a doctor said to him point blank, "Sir, your wife is not my priority right now." And she was bleeding and she continued to bleed for 9 hours. And we're not listening. We're not listening to Serena Williams. So what about that, a low income mother in the middle of the country who had to drive 2 hours to get to her hospital? These are realities in America. And, I'm out here trying to force folks' attention to that, trying to force lawmakers appropriations to that, make sure that we put budget toward this. But what I hear on the other side is they're saying, well, when you look at the numbers, it's not that many moms that we're losing, right? Lose a mom, you lose a whole world. Okay. And they are saying, I've heard, well, we have a pilot that we did in 200 spots and we were able to decrease maternal mortality by 41%, but they think that they did that pilot and they're checking that box and they're moving on. So my concern here is that it's not a real concern. It's
mhm,
something that when lawmakers' faces are forced to look at it, they're alarmed, but they want a quick solution. And what I know to be true is that this is a systemic problem. This goes back to the way we view women, the way we view Black women. It's a real problem, and it's important to name it and to not dismiss it. And, because we work in an intentionally bipartisan way. Look, we know we're in a bipartisan system and that's not going anywhere. We know that we have to have relationships and we've built them across the political spectrum. We have to be talking to lawmakers on all sides within the states and at the federal level. And we have to find ways to get into this conversation and stay in it so people don't shut down. And so you see things like Rep. Lauren Underwood, she and her team have taken the word Black out of the momnibus. It was the Black maternal health caucus, Black maternal health momnibus. It's now the momnibus. And I understand that there are pragmatics that go into this. Like we need the funding and we need to not have there be noise, but it shatters me and breaks me that that's considered to be a roadblock for folks. And so someone in my position as an advocate, we have to keep naming what the problem really
mhm,
is. One thing that it was both really hard to attend and equally as important. In 2022, Chamber of Mothers was invited to a CDC maternal health convening, and it was at HHS. And there was a new program that the CDC put together called Hear Her. And it was because a woman at the CDC, a Black woman, had died in childbirth. And of course, everyone, I believe she was a good friend of Rep. Lauren Underwood's, everyone really came in to support her and her family and also said, wow, this is a problem. This is not a one off. This is a problem.
mhm.
And for me, the fact that the solution is to hear her and that our government is rolling out something called Hear Her, it just killed me. I mean, I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad we're naming it. But I thought to myself, I'm sitting in this room of their experts and doctors and advocates and leaders. And I thought, can you imagine a room where we have to be told to listen to men?
Yeah.
So, but all that being said, and I'm just being really honest with you about what this fight feels like.
Mhm,
All that having been said, women have always had to fight to get what we're due. We had to fight for voting rights. We had to fight to get our own credit card. We've always had to fight. No one's paying us to fight. We have to fight. And it's absolutely not fair, but I was raised since I was a little girl. My mom and dad are both people that are wired for service, and they showed me what that looks like. And I've always felt like if it's that whole, I was raised as a Christian. And so in my family, it was, to those who are much is given, who much is given, much is expected. I don't even think that's a Bible verse. I think it's like somehow been co opted as a Christian thing, but it's not. But that was kind of a mantra in my household. And I didn't grow up with a bunch of wealth. It was a really poor steel town, but my parents saw that I had abilities and they saw that, I walk around in privilege and they said, "You've been given a lot. There's a lot expected of you." And it doesn't that feels like a rallying cry.
Mm,
I just feel like if I learn something, I have not only an obligation, I am now so motivated to go do something about it. And I won't stop until I feel that I am not useful in this fight. Whether we've solved it or I'm somehow not useful, I'm here to stay in it because I can't look at these facts and then decide to just go about my day.
yeah. So I'd like to take a moment to tell you this is my passion project based on years of experience as an OB/GYN doctor. I aim to empower moms and moms to be and those in the pregnancy and postpartum care space. If you appreciate what I do, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with your friends so we can reach more people like you. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. If you have any requests, suggestions, or questions for future episodes, please email me at hello@goldenhour.fm or leave us a comment at goldenhour.fm on Instagram. Erin, how do we clone you? But alas, there's a lot of people like you out there, a lot of people who don't necessarily have your eloquence or the strength of your voice. But I appreciate your parents. They want you to take advantage of your intelligence, your privilege, the privilege that means being well educated, being a white woman. I think that for me as a woman of color, even though I recognize the statistics that we shared, and I won't lie to you, there are moments, especially as my husband and I are finally ready to grow a family, where I am gripped with my own anxiety because it's real. I also recognize I do have privilege. I'm an OBGYN. I can literally handpick my
Mm,
labor and delivery team. They're my colleagues, the people who love me and invest in me, right? And I think sometimes people don't realize how real these numbers are, right? I
mhm.
think as you know, I shared at the Power Breakfast that unfortunately one of my sister's good friends and colleagues, and my sister also a doctor in in New York City, so a big urban center. One of her colleagues unfortunately died kind of related to prolonged complications, probably related to her prior pregnancies, right? And she also was a Black woman. So you have a situation where being educated, having a good career, having a high socioeconomic status in terms of your income aren't protective for
Yeah.
certain races and populations. And so I think if you think about what's going to serve the broad population that is mothers and mothers to be and their families, it's honestly fixing the issue for the most underserved and disparate, right? Because anything that you do to improve Black and Indigenous maternal health will help in multitudes for others who otherwise don't necessarily have the same healthcare disparities or rates of poor outcomes. I also I also really appreciate, I mean, so much of what you said, but I really also appreciate the fact that you highlight the oversimplicity of
Mm,
movements like Hear Her, right? Weren't we
mm.
all taught to like listen in preschool? Like, wasn't
Right.
like the star that we got when we went home to our parents were like, yes, you listened, good job. And yet
Totally.
somehow we live in a society where whether it's being a woman or a brown or Black woman, that we're just not heard. I
It's
mean,
true.
I lived it in the scariest way last summer, unrelated to maternal health. My mom unfortunately got literally deathly ill, and she has 2 doctor daughters, and I am convinced that the reason why my mom's alive today is because of us, because we were advocating for her. We had to call out her doctors multiple times to take things seriously, and there were certain interventions along the way that kept her alive had we not had our voice to speak to her, and that's not related to maternal health. That's because she's a small, sweet Nigerian immigrant woman, and they just looked at her less, right?
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so moved by what we've talked about, and I think naming it again and again and again, even if people just get annoyed and think like, "Oh, you're just blowing hot air." No, like, I think there's a reason why you have your voice and your skill and your strength. The reason why I have my voice, it's to make sure that these horrific outcomes that are death, that should never be acceptable. Like, one death is one death too many, especially
100%.
for women who and people who are birthing because of you're at an age when you're not supposed to die, right? It's just
Yeah,
one death too many. Oh,
absolutely. The story with your mother, this is something important to talk about too, because it's often women who are caretaking our elders and they
mhm,
do lose their voice, for different reasons, but they're overwhelmed. I go on a walk with a good girlfriend of mine here twice a week. It's like our mental health and physical health time. And she was talking about some complications with her dad and saying how her mom is not that helpful right now. That was the same. My dad had open heart surgery a couple years ago. And I was the one that advocated. And you often have daughters, and sometimes those daughters are mothers who are doing that advocating and caring, and they need to be the voice. And we're carrying so much of that. So to provide us with the support systems that sustain us, to your point, like this is a very specific way that when you take care of a woman, when you take care of a mother, you're taking care of our community. It's the whole life cycle. Yes, it's the babies and children, it's also the elders. We are holding the fabric of our communities together, and it's really important that we have more support. I mean, it's inhumane, in my view, that we have no federal paid family and medical leave. And it's important to say that I do have a lot of hope that paid family and medical leave, it's getting passed state by state.
mhm,
And that is really exciting. And we want to be really supportive of that. Also, there are now states that are leading the way around childcare. If you look at New Mexico, universal childcare, and what's going on in New York City, there are leaders that are leading the way because they know that when you support a mother, when you support a family, when you support a child, that is how you create a better nation. That's how you create a better future. And I think it's important too, in all of this at Chamber Mothers, we see our job to help people stay in this fight because they have hope. We need hope to keep going. We need joy to keep going. And a lot of that comes from being in community, from having conversations with people like you, from sharing what we're going through with other people. We have chapters now all over the country. We have 52 chapters, and these are spaces, whether they look like some chapters like our Phoenix chapter and Maryland and Cincinnati, some of them have a lot of structure, and they have regular meetings, and they have 3 leaders, and they're really structured. Some of them are action networks. Here in South Carolina, it's an action network. So if there's a mom that feels really fired up about the fact that loss isn't included in our paltry 6 weeks leave, in Boston, the teachers aren't included. Those moms say, "Hey, I want to do something about this." And then Chamber Mothers, our headquarters, we have, advocacy toolkits, and we have scripts to help you testify in front of your state house. And any support that you need, we can media train you, we can advocacy train you to go out there and be the strong advocate. But in order to even have the desire to do that, because again,
mhm.
we're volunteering to fight and we're already exhausted,
Yeah,
you gotta have hope. So I think
no.
it's important to remember that too, that there are women out there fighting on behalf of other women, and that you can find a lot of hope when you turn to other women who say, "Yeah, me too. I also went through that, and I'm finding it really hard." And I too am struggling with an aging parent, and how to get through to them and get through to doctors. We have to hang in there together.
No, I mean, I say this time and time again in the podcast with my patients in my real life. We need to be in village, right? That's what we were in village when our ancestors, went from monkeys to Homo sapiens or whatever you believe in, right? That there's always that sense of community. As we
Mhm.
become more and more modern, we become more and more individualized. But I think the
Yeah.
power of organizations like Chamber of Mothers or just pregnancy and being postpartum where you're out in a playground and you see another new mom and you just like you make eye contact, you're like, "Hey, I
Yes.
got you, girl. I know what you're going through," right? There's
Yeah.
something so powerful about community.
Mhm.
As an OBGYN, I see so many women carrying this emotional load long before they become mothers, let alone postpartum. I really appreciated you, describing the difference between your postpartum elation. I love that idea, that feeling, so palpable versus that postpartum depression, anxiety that came later on when you had to go back to work. What are mothers carrying today that policymakers and employers still fail to see?
I mean, you nailed it. It's the mental health piece. And I sat in a round table after our power breakfast, and at the very end, it was brought up just the impact of substance use on maternal mortality, and the event wrapped so fast. And I went to the reporters and sent them all this information on mental health, because that's what substance use has to do with. It's mothers who are feeling incredibly unsupported. They don't know where to turn. And with matrescence, the reason it's so important to have a word for it is it's the biggest hormonal shift that happens to any species at any point in their lifetime. So it's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, all of this is happening at the same time. So you can imagine a mom who is isolated for whatever reason. She could be low income, high income, middle of the country, in New York City or LA. It doesn't matter. If she feels isolated and she feels ashamed and she's scared of her own thoughts and she doesn't have a place to turn that can be helpful, you can see how she will spiral. And I think, folks in our government who would rather not look at this sort of, sorry, Al Gore, but inconvenient truth, they would rather say, these are just moms who, it's the substance abuse. That's like an issue for another day. And what I love about folks, I keep talking about Lauren Underwood, but she's really been a heroine in this space. Like, she's put together the Moms Matter Act because she knows that moms need access to support when they're struggling with their mental health. So, like, I have this sitting on my desk all the time, the 1-800 number that moms can call to get help. And we know, just even inside one state, in the state of Arkansas, where Governor Sanders started a helpline, a postpartum support helpline, 20% of the moms who called got referred back for follow-up care. And we know that if moms can access support in that first year postpartum, that is where we will save their lives. So as you know, we lose most of our moms in the first year postpartum. And a lot of it has to do, we lose moms to suicide. I mean, it can be very dark. And these are moms who really need support. And I loved how you talked about, enjoying the work that you do because you see women so regularly. And as you know well, that sadly comes to an end. The baby enters the scene, and most moms don't see their OBGYN again for 6 weeks. And a lot happens within that 6 weeks to the mom, and all the attention goes to the baby. And I'll say this too, a lot of the attention that goes to the baby can make a mom feel like a failure, because there's a huge emphasis on how much weight the baby is gaining. And a lot of that pressure and stress is put back on the mom. They'll ask you a lot of questions about, well, how are you feeding them? How much are you feeding them? Is one breast fuller than the other breast? Are you rotating breast? How am I supposed to know to rotate breast? Nobody told me this, and so moms then leave these appointments feeling bad, feeling like they don't know where to turn. And, there's sort of this adage that there's no manual to raise a child, but there are many books on child rearing, but and how to even keep a baby alive and healthy. There's nothing on how to love and support and care for a new mom. Moms are really dropped off. And so, I don't know what you think about this, but a lot of us at Chamber, when we think about how to solve it, we say there should be a specialty that is for a mom after she gives birth. Like,
Yeah.
because there's that OB, there's the gyne, but that's about your gynecological health. But there's nothing that's sort of this wraparound support from, like, okay, you had a baby, let's see you through to the end of your life. And I'm glad that there's now, that doctors are being taught about menopause in med school. I'm happy to see those developments, but there's really this gap in women's health around providers. And I think when women see that gap, what they fill that gap with is, I must be a bad mom. I must be doing it wrong. I must not be, doing a good job of, like, getting the sleep and eating the food and taking the peptides. Like, there's all this, like, do all the stuff,
Mhm.
and it's overwhelming and it's expensive. And so moms that are feeling like they don't have access and there's not a structure that they're meant to turn to, they feel bad. And so what we are fighting for all the time is to normalize these feelings and these experiences that moms have, and sometimes even bring levity to it, right? Like, we've all been there, and let's talk about it and let's make it very real so that moms can feel comfortable reaching out for support, whether it be a hotline or to a friend and offering that support back. Like you said, in the grocery store, like there's a mom that's struggling, like going up to me like, oh my gosh, I've been there. Like, what can I do? How can I hold them? And please don't say to a mom, you got your hands full, by the way.
That's just annoying. It's like if you
It's
told
all
me
every older man.
you look tired. I'm like, yeah, fuck you. I know I look tired, but don't tell me. Like, just
Seriously. Thanks for
no.
nothing.
But Erin, yeah, I mean, I still remember there's one patient who I feel like truly inspired my podcast and the way that I move in this space and advocate in this space now was a patient who we were homies through her pregnancy. I remember really enjoyed seeing each other. By the end of the pregnancy, we felt so close. And then you're right, lo and behold, it's probably a year-ish later when she came back in to see me for a pap smear, and I was excited to see her again, asking about the baby, asking for pictures, and she's just like, you know what, real talk, Dr. Nseo, you really dropped the ball. I was like, what do you
Oh,
mean? I thought I did a great job. She's like, no, like you disappeared after I had my baby. Like that was one of the hardest years of my life. And I felt like I was
oh,
totally on my own. And the call out was real. And you're right. I unfortunately exist in a healthcare system that only reimburse well, luckily we do 2 postpartum visits, 2 weeks and 6 weeks, but that's it, right? And so even though I acknowledge that I would have loved to have continued to check in on that patient for the weeks and months and years to come immediately postpartum, my healthcare system doesn't allow me to function that way. That's why I
mhm.
feel so fortunate that this podcast, this space lets me step out of it and say, that's bullshit. I don't really want to act in this way. This is not how I want to serve. And it's like you're in my head. My dream is to create some kind of postpartum haven that integrates all the specialists that a mom needs, that has someone like me, an OBGYN, that helps guide them from your therapist to your pelvic physical therapist to your nutritionist, not about the baby. Lactation is important, but your nutritionist, your body,
Yeah,
the way that your
100%.
body is going to recover. We know that a lot of women these days, especially those of us who are career focused or academically driven, are essentially having babies as they're leading into perimenopause. What does that mean to go from one of the biggest transformations, that is matrescence, into another epic transformation of perimenopause to
Absolutely.
menopause, right? We can talk about it for forever. Erin, what's your dream state? What's your motherhood utopia, right? If America could redesign how we support mothers, families, what would a country that was that focused on families truly look like?
My answer comes from listening to other women and what we hear from folks inside of our chapters. And then there was just a study done by New America. It's the biggest study of parents that's outside of governmental studies. And what we hear over and over, moms want more time, they want more quality time with their families. And the biggest barrier for that is financial. 74% of mothers participate in the workforce. And so there's this false idea that women are choosing to be full time moms or full time at work. The vast majority of folks aren't choosing. They have to work to eat, they have to work to feed their families. And so what we really need is breathing room. We need such support. We need to know that that support is there, that of course you have time away from work and it's paid, and you can go back to that job if you choose to, and you can and you want to, and you're not going to have the job stolen from you. Of course, of course you're going to do that. Of course there's time for your body to heal and for you to bond with your baby and for you to kind of get used to the new life that you have. Of course, we're going to have childcare that's affordable. And by the way, in a form that feels right for you and for your family. And of course, we're going to pay childcare providers what they deserve. Of course, we're going to pay them more than living wages because they're doing such important work. And they're often parents, by the way. That's another false
Mhm.
divide. Like these childcare providers are parents. Of course, we're going to understand women's bodies who, bring life into the world. And of course, we're going to make it accessible and affordable for them to take care of themselves. These things are common sense. And most countries around the world with
Yeah.
way less wealth than we have figured that out. And so, you'll look at a lot of talking heads as a mom and get the sense that no one really cares about you, and it's all up to you to figure out. But the truth of the matter is You want more time with your babies? You want more time to just enjoy life? Of course you do. Of course you do. Of course you want to be the one that's there to pick up your baby after school and see their smile when they run out. Of course you want to go to the 8th grade graduation ceremony and see if your kid got a reward or, wipe their tears if they didn't. Of course you want to be on the soccer field and like, cheer your daughter. Of course. And you should have the time and space to do that and to be able to show up and contribute to the world around you in the way that you dreamt of when you were a little girl. And of course, you should have time to just chill. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just basic. We got one life, right? And we've got to look
Mhm.
around and say, I want to be here and enjoy this and enjoy the people that are around me. And, you know, you will have people, the kind of heat that we take sometimes from folks who don't want the government involved in these things will say, well, we don't want too much government in our lives. The truth of the matter is, until the government sets the norm about what we want to pay for and where our priorities are, our culture is not going to shift. And so I'll keep fighting to make sure our government sets a norm that our culture follows so that women can live whole lives.
I'm gonna keep fighting with you, girl. Like I said, I'm just at
Appreciate it.
church
Yes,
and
you are.
preacher Erin Erenberg is just moving the crowd right now.
Aw,
So
thanks.
grateful for you. I know we're wrapping up and I just have just two more questions for you. Many women feel this guilt, right? No matter what they do, whether it's working, staying at home, asking for help, not asking for help.
Mhm.
Why do you think mothers are expected to carry so much guilt?
I think that this is a weapon used against women to keep us from being in our full power. I truly do. Go back to those numbers that I rattled off of 85 million of us controlling all of the household spending and 11 to 15 trillion that we put into the economy every year. We are so powerful. And it's like a best kept secret. And the more we're divided over, oh, the trad wives versus the girl boss versus the, breastfeeding versus formula versus, do you co sleep or do you sleep train? Who cares? These narratives don't serve us. They do not. And I heard it's not my quote, but I've used a version of it. But the way she said it was Dr. Tiffany Manuel, who, by the way, you might want to have her on the podcast. She's
Mhm.
amazing. But she said something recently at an event I attended, which is when we move in solidarity, we move with more power. And that is true of women and mothers. And so, anytime, I would just say to moms listening, if you're tempted to sort of judge another mom for, oh, she sent her kid to boarding school and I would never do that, or just knock it off. Like, we have to hold ourselves accountable to the behaviors, and to use the, divisive term, but like it's internalized misogyny. We've been taught that we are not good. And so to try to make ourselves feel better, we can tear other people down. At the end of the day, we don't win. You don't win. I don't win. None of us wins when we do that. And so I think the bad news is that we are playing a role in this as women. I think the good news is we can stop right now. We can knock it off.
Yeah. Oof. Chills always. Okay. I always like to, the theme of this conversation, even though we've hit on really heavy shit because it's real,
Mhm.
is that theme of hope, right? And I think I want to end on that inspiring note. So when you imagine your daughter or the next generation of girls, those who wish or maybe hope to become a mother one day, what do you hope will be different about motherhood in America because of the work that you're doing today?
I hope that they can choose to do it exactly the way they wanna do it, and
Mm,
it's entirely their choice, and it's a supported one, and they feel, supported in the tough times of motherhood and the tough times at work and the tough times of contributing to the world around them, and they feel celebrated in all the joys, that they can choose their path and they can feel support. It's not ever gonna be perfect. Life is always gonna be effort, but what we need is choice and we need support.
beautifully said.
Thank
Everything that you said this episode has been so powerful and inspiring. And I think for me as an OBGYN who, I feel like I fight the good fight on the ground. I'm in the trenches, if you will, seeing patients in the hospital, in clinic. It gives me that much more hope and faith that our society can finally support birthers and mothers and new parents in the way that they deserve. I feel like I see the failings day in, day out, but thanks to people like you and Chamber of Mothers, I have so much hope for my own personal future if motherhood is meant to be, let alone the generation of girls and women that stand before us. So I'm so grateful for you. You are a true, true gift. And I'm so lucky I get to call you a friend as well.
Likewise. And I want to say on the record, I think it's really important to say thank you for your work. And OBGYNs are the good guys and gals. They are in this fight with us. I think you all are taking a lot of heat. And I know a lot of folks who are not choosing to be OBGYNs or leaving the practice. And you guys, it's because of the insurance system. It is not the men and women who are OBGYNs. It is because, you reimbursement and all this complicated gobbledygook that I don't want to go into here, but just please know that we are linking arms with you. You are an important key part of this fight. And as we work to have more wraparound support, more doulas, more midwives, more lactation specialists, more pelvic floor specialists, OBGYNs are such an important piece of this puzzle. And we just thank you for everything that you're doing.
Erin, I say this often, sometimes these episodes become therapy sessions I didn't know I needed. So not only did I go to church today, but I also had a therapy session. So no, such beautiful words to end on, because I do know that there are clinicians, providers out there that need to be reminded of that. And I hope that patients also appreciate that. Yeah, we are on their side too. We
Yes,
truly
you
are.
are. We appreciate
So much gratitude for you, Erin. I appreciate you so, so much.
you too. Thanks for having me. Thanks for
You're
saying this.
welcome. Thank you very much for listening to The Golden Hour, the podcast community where moms and moms-to-be can hear stories from other mothers and learn from top experts in pregnancy and postpartum care. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with your friends so we can reach more people like you. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. If you have any requests, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, please email me at hello@goldenhour.fm or leave us a comment at goldenhour.fm on Instagram. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, stay golden.